Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Great. I'm going to attempt to present this slide. Okay, hopefully we can see a slide now. Can you see something?
Perfect. Thank you, Emma.
Brilliant. Right, first I must apologise for my voice. I have just developed a cold, so thank you very much for sticking around this late in the day. Mine is going to be very short. I've realised one of the dilemmas of presenting this late on is the temptation to respond to everything that's been said before. So I'll try and stick to what I prepared and not wander too much into points raised by other sessions today. So unfortunately, my colleague Claudia is unable to join me today, but I am a senior academic developer, which comes under many names in other universities, but I'm a staff-facing role. My background is in the humanities, like many of the speakers today, and I'm certainly not an AI expert, so I've come via a circuitous route to learning and teaching. I wanted to speak today because the title of today's session left me with far more questions than answers, and up front, there are still going to be more questions than answers by the end of what I have to say today. So I was kind of asking myself, how do we define success in terms of guidance? And then how am I going to measure whether or not what we have produced is successful? And who is it going to be successful for? So in the next few minutes, hopefully I'm going to give a brief overview of why we have chosen guidance over policy, as have many of the speakers today. A brief outline of the timeline of our approach to the guidance that we've developed is on the slide. I'm going to share what minimal data we have managed to collect so far to potentially measure some of the impact of what we have produced and to pose the questions that I consider to be the next challenge before we now redevelop our approach to Gen AI guidance at CCCU. So kind of to return to a point that's been made a few times today, we had a choice between guidance or policy. So should we guide or should we police? If they're both done properly, then they should both be informative and they should both protect us from harm. But guidance is voluntary, which is both a blessing and a curse. And policing requires resources, it requires procedures to sit beside it, and it requires enforcement. And those are resources that we do not have available to us at CCCU. And ultimately, I don't think that we have the moral authority to do that either. So we settled very early on the principle that at CCCU, our approach to generative AI would be educative rather than punitive. So has this worked? Yes, and no as well. Um, so as you can see, the timeline for the development of the guidance and tools started in 2003, and our staff guidance was released at the start of the 2023 academic year. Student guidance came a year later. This was mainly because it was me developing it and I am in a staff-facing role, and it took a little while to rally everybody together to start the working group that was to produce the much more collaborative student guidance. So the stakeholders were broad. Having just listened to Jamie talk about how broad UCL is and thinking about student numbers at some of the other institutions, we have a very small institution comparably. We have comparably smaller resource to do this as well. But it did mean I had to go and talk to a lot of people who I wouldn't necessarily otherwise have spoken to, and has actually been a vehicle for really building collaborative working approaches as well, which has been very positive. So the whole thing has been bottom up. It's been an evolving approach. We were approached by faculty members saying, this is what we need. Can you please make it? What we have not had at any point is strategic direction set by a higher authority within the university. So everything that you see described and produced on that slide has been done by the staff, for the staff and students at the university. Now, this produces its own challenges. So we have very little data to say what works and what doesn't work. So a staff guidance and any staff-facing pages, our website is very old and it has no data. There is no way to collect analytics data for it. So I only have analytics data for our student-facing guidance. And this is of interest. 12 months worth of data tells me that 7,500 people have visited that site. And of those, there are an average of 2 views per user who stay on our guidance web pages for an average of 2 minutes and 25 seconds. So what does that actually mean? I'm not in a position to say what that actually means. I can look at numbers and I can look at figures. I can look at the number of staff who have been at my workshops that I run, and I can look at the feedback they give me, mostly positive. Although I do recognise some of Jamie's comments about anger and frustration that staff undergo in these workshops as well. But probably what's had the biggest impact on us has been that we have recently undergone a curriculum framework redesign project, which has been led by our team, who have a full-time equivalent of 3.5 people. And we have taken 116 courses and still going through a full curriculum framework redesign in the last 15 months, which has given us a unique perspective to stand in front of colleagues and say, we need to think about this. We need to think about assessment innovation. Now, Martin Compton, who was the first presenter today, came to one of our learning and teaching conferences and very kindly gave a keynote presentation where he spoke about the 3 AIs. And that has kind of fed into the approach to artificial intelligence and assessment innovation that we have been posing to our colleagues as they've been through this course redesign process. So from workshops that have been formalised through this curriculum redesign process to chats in the canteen and people grabbing me and pulling me to one side and spilling out all of their fears about what AI will mean for them and their jobs and their assessments and their students, to actually sitting on validation panels and seeing the fruits of people working through those labours and coming up with some really fantastic and innovative assessment design. Do I think it's working? Yes, to a certain extent I do. Have we also had massive spikes in some areas of the university in terms of academic misconduct panels? Yes, we have. Do I feel that we're reaching everybody equally? No, I don't. Do I think we have a lot of work to do? Absolutely. So I think really we need to think very, very carefully about the kind of questions that we are asking in terms of success, what success looks like, what our guidance, our workshops and our training need to evolve into, and how we make sure that we're reaching everybody we need to across the university. So can I measure the impact of what I'm doing? Somewhat. But the key questions I want to ask, and I'm keeping this short and sweet today because my voice is probably going to give up fairly soon, is how do we define success for our approach to Gen AI guidance and for whom? How do we measure that success beyond the metrics that I can gain from web pages and numbers of bottoms on seats in workshops? And how should any measurement we take then direct our next steps? So hopefully short and sweet. If anyone would like to answer any of those questions for me, then I would be extremely happy to hear their answers. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Emma. And I'm sorry to hear about your voice as well. That's it's never nice. David, you have put your hand up. Would you like to ask a question? If you would like to ask a question, if you could raise your hand. What I'm going to do just while we're waiting, because I think we do have a few minutes, is if it's okay with you, Emma, what I've just done is I have just quickly created a slide, which we could maybe gather some of your thoughts and we can share it with everyone afterwards. Why not? Since we've got a lot of people on the call, so I thought that might be quite a nice way to do that. So I've just put on
Action,
there,
research and practice. Love it. Go.
Absolutely. So in terms of guidance, AI guidance, what does success look like? So if you have time, maybe you could have a look at the poll I've just put on my screen. You could use your phone or you can join via Vvox app and then enter the ID code, which is 100-872-610, and we will share the kind of the output of that with everyone following the webinar. But if you do have any questions or any statements, or maybe what you've been doing with in terms of evaluating your guidance, maybe you could raise your hand and maybe share it with us now, because I think it's a great platform to be able to do that. While people are doing that, Emma, in terms of kind of the story that you've painted, I think from what I've heard and from people I've spoken to, I don't think this is uncommon. We are able to look at Google Analytics for our web page guidance. And I know we've spoken recently, and I've kind of had a look at our web page guidance recently. And we have had, I think, in the region of around over the past 2 months, 900 views on that web page in 2 months, which I think in the grand scheme of things is not very high at all. And then when you look at kind of the time that students are on that web page, I think we're looking at around a minute. So it's never nice to kind of look at those stats and think, okay, we put a lot of work into that. But when you kind of look at those figures, for me, I think it really highlights that I think there's something we're not doing quite right, and this is something that we need to look to review, adapt, and kind of move forward. Um,
I did a little
so
informal survey of colleagues, Phil. So we have a kind of long-standing chat on Teams for people who are interested. So it's a self-selecting bunch, highly informal. And I asked people, so 60 people on that chat, and I asked them a series of 8 questions, and 20 people responded. So that's like, a 33% response rate, which was quite high. But the thing that came across most strongly to me in that little kind of informal survey is most people are signposting colleagues to guidance and they're using it in their teaching. So I think that's a format that I think has potential possibly to pursue, is to provide guidance that actually staff are taking with them into class to use as a tool to speak to students about, to support them to have those conversations. Um, and that's kind of what I've framed the workshops I've run around, is very much I cannot I can't nuance this. I cannot tailor this to your specific needs, your specific disciplinary needs. But what I can do is equip you with the tools to have those conversations with your students and to do that in a productive way. So, I'm agreeing with the majority of the talks that have been put forward today in terms of we have a diverse range of needs within any institution. So whatever we do has to be about principles based and has to be adaptable, because there are no straightforward answers in terms of go and do this and this will work. Of course, that's not going to be the way.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think we've got around 2 minutes left. So I think one question that maybe I was going to ask you, if that's okay, in terms of kind of your guidance. I know you say you have web page guidance, things like that. Where do you kind of promote that guidance? Do you do it kind of on kind of digital screens around the university? Is it through kind of paper signage, or do you surface that level of, or do you point to that guidance from other sources? So, for example, from module pages or anything like that, which students are directly involved, kind of, or working on for particular modules.
At the moment, it's mostly been a digital strategy through marketing communications, so tapping into
Yeah,
student marketing communications. I'd like to get it embedded into our Blackboard. We use Blackboard VLE so that it's embedded in every module web page with a nuanced version of whichever kind of whatever is relevant for that module. Um, there is no paper, unfortunately. That's not something that we have. We have a few posters around site, but I don't think that would be the most effective way of getting to our students. Um, I do not really do social media, but I have a plan in place to, particularly for new cohorts coming in September, to try and leverage the university's social media to get them to at least look at the guidance or be aware that we have some.
yeah. Okay, well, it certainly sounds like you're going, well, I would have thought in the right direction. That's something that we're looking into as well in terms of September for next year. We're looking to kind of embed links to guidance and information within each module page directly, and that's not something we've done up until now. So we're hoping that that kind of increases awareness and things like that. So yeah, a lot alongside other kind of courses, of course. We're also looking at developing an AI literacy module, which all students and staff will be enrolled on, and they'll see that in their list of modules. So we're hoping that kind of those two things might actually lead to an increase in engagement with them. We really hope so anyway. But we're working with a number of different people on those sources. So yeah, okay, well, thank you so much, Emma. I think we have actually reached time. I will share. Thank you for those of you that have contributed already. I'm just going to take this slide down, but I'll pop a link to it in the chat if that's okay. If you have time, if you could contribute, that would be really great. And I will share the results at the end of this webinar. So you'll all be able to take a look. So thank you so much.